And I'm going to start my presentation with a question to the audience. Does anyone know, in the English language, the C word that is the nastiest, dirtiest word possible? Before I have anyone shout out any nasty words, I'll answer for you. The word is conscription. And that's related to my presentation today, where I'm going to talk about mobilisation. Now, every responsible national government must achieve a balance of prosperity and security. But in the past decade, the rise of Chinese and Russian power and the growing instability in the global security environment has meant that governments must now turn their attention to achieving a different balance of prosperity and security. It forces them to again ponder the topic of mobilisation. Now, mobilisation involves a deliberate and planned use of society's resources to achieve national objectives in time of war, crisis and disaster. Now, such an approach demands a more holistic approach to mobilising national capacity to ensure that national sovereignty is preserved and that democracy itself survives into the 22nd century. It requires governments have honest and sustained conversations with their citizens. Mobilisation in the modern era requires a social licence from citizens. Now, in this talk, I'll explain why mobilisation and planning for it is a vital concept not only for war, but for deterring war. Key elements and implications of mobilisation planning are explored through the lens of what I call the mobilisation trinity: people, industry and ideas. Now, first we need to discuss the relationship between mobilisation and deterrence. Deterrence is the practice of discouraging or restraining a nation-state or non-state entity from taking unwanted actions. Mobilisation is a critical element of deterrence because the existence of mobilisation plans and the regular rehearsal of key elements of the plan will be visible to potential adversaries and will have an impact on their strategic decision-making about aggression, coercion and war. Now, three key elements link deterrence and mobilisation. The first is that mobilisation is a statement of will. Now, the development of a mobilisation plan, much less its implementation, is a demonstration by a government or a nation of its will. The notion of will is crucial because deterrence is ultimately about impacting the perceptions of a potential aggressor. If they perceive that will is lacking in a potential target nation, they will see this as provocative. However, if they perceive that their target possesses the will to resist aggression, this will have a deterrent effect. Now, secondly, mobilisation is a threat to prolong war. When faced with the decision to provoke a war, a potential adversary must weigh crucial factors such as political aims, geography and resources. Importantly, they must also consider temporal features such as how long a war might last and therefore how much national treasure might be required to achieve desired political aims of that war. If an adversary is aware that their target can quickly mobilise people, industry and other resources, they then must reckon with a much longer and more expensive war. Third, mobilisation is a pathway to generating uncertainty and potentially overwhelming an aggressor with mass. While an aggressor nation will undertake calculations about the potential size of their target, they can't be fully sure about how much national capacity might be mobilised to thwart their aims. Now, there are caveats, however. Any form of mobilisation, even more limited forms that include selected call-up of reserve personnel and minor expansions in defence industrial capacity, is expensive. There are also significant opportunity costs. Every dollar spent on mobilisation and a nation's defensive capacity is money not able to be spent on social priorities such as schools, roads, housing and other important concerns. But in summary, a nation that has feasible plans to mobilise quickly is telegraphing to potential aggressors that we are ready, don't try anything. While even a partial mobilisation for military purposes might be expensive, it may end up being much cheaper than having to fight because we failed to sufficiently invest in deterring aggression. So what might mobilisation look like in the modern era? As I telegraphed at the beginning, it consists, I think, of industry, people and ideas. So what are some of the issues with industrial mobilisation. Now, we've recently seen the emergence of a new arsenal of authoritarians, with China and Russia producing large quantities of defence and other manufactures. But there remains limited capacity for producing large quantities of munitions and defence equipment in most Western nations. While some munitions production is beginning to expand in some countries, many other elements of defence production must also do the same. Some newer technologies which have demonstrated military utility in Ukraine, such as drones, do not require massive levels of investment in large factories or long lead time subcomponents. Many types of drones are currently being manufactured in mass quantities at lower prices than other conventional weapons as well. Ukraine has achieved this, and it is currently producing hundreds of thousands of drones per year, with the aim of being able to produce 2 million a year by next year. Now, industrial mobilisation in many countries might also be improved and accelerated with more distributed forms of manufacturing underpinned by advances in robotic assembly and additive manufacturing. 3D printing will impact on what is made and where it is made, and will allow for more rapid prototyping and customisation. Now, this will also have an impact on the labour market, however, and will result in a more competitive environment for people, particularly with IT skills in the civil sector, while also exacerbating military recruitment of people with the same skill sets. Which leads us to the next element of mobilisation: people. Now, it's becoming increasingly clear that the all-volunteer force models adopted by many countries in the wake of Vietnam are increasingly unreliable ways of ensuring adequate numbers of military personnel. This is posing a significant challenge for the readiness and the size of military institutions in countries such as the United States, Britain, Australia and elsewhere. Now, this shortfall in people has a flow-on effect, with military units running at lower personnel levels, which in turn impacts on capability, readiness and sustainability. It's hard to fight tonight if you only have 50% of your people. The concept of mobilisation becomes crucial in such an environment because it may provide the foundations for a different approach to securing sufficient numbers of people. Many democracies will probably have to consider mixed forms of military service, which include volunteer, reserve and national service personnel, if they're to build the forces with the mass and, more importantly, the array of different skill sets required in modern and future military forces. Now, another aspect of mobilising people is addressing the current exquisite approaches to military training and education. Many nations have small, highly professionalised institutions which put their people through, as I described, exquisite training regimes, which consume a lot of time. It is likely that these approaches are not survivable in an environment where mixed military service categories may be required, where time is limited, or where there is a need for a very fast and very large expansion. The 2022 Russian partial mobilisation debacle provides insights into mobilising people. Having hollowed out the training cadres required for military expansion, the Russian mobilisation effort struggled for months. Therefore, just as industry needs to build new factories in any mobilisation of defence production, military institutions must build their training workforce if they're to have any hope of effectively expanding the size of military forces if called upon to do so. But as these changes in people policy are implemented, new and evolving ideas about warfighting and military affairs will also be required, and this is the third and final element of a 21st century mobilisation concept. Nations must be able to leverage their best minds as individuals and as collectives to develop solutions to military and national defence problems, implement them effectively, and to learn and adapt as events in peace and war transpire. An important element of mobilising the intellectual capacity of a nation is building an improved understanding of potential adversaries. Russia is a nation that Western nations have studied intensively for decades. The decade of reforms under Shoigu and Gerasimov was subject to many reports and extensive analysis, but this still proved insufficient as predictions of Russian military effectiveness in the opening days of their 2022 large-scale invasion of Ukraine. So we must also mobilise new ideas about warfighting. The massive expansion in autonomous and semi-autonomous systems across all domains is having a profound impact. Drones and AI are also beginning to have an impact in longer-range strike complexes as well as on air defence environments. This is likely to force change in military organisations at least as consequential as the formation of air forces in the 20th century. It is likely to result in a shift in the ratio of humans and autonomous systems across the deep, close and rear operations of military endeavours. And as this ratio of humans to autonomous, quasi-intelligent machines shift, so too must the leadership, training and education regimes evolve. Contemporary military training and education systems are founded on humans using machines, but there must be a shift to a training culture where humans partner with machines and algorithms. This will change. This will shift military culture significantly. Now, a final element of intellectual mobilisation is harnessing the research and development skills of a nation to solve defence-related problems of a non-military nature. This may also require mobilising academia. While that sounds like a very difficult herding cats kind of problem, there are already many examples where military academia collaboration is occurring in countries such as Australia, Britain, Sweden, Canada and others. But more can be done. Now, two final strategic issues related to mobilisation bear scrutiny: coordination and timing. And the strategic orchestration of mobilisation activities must be undertaken at the highest levels of government. I would emphasise it is not a military enterprise. Rather, it is a whole-of-nation concern. It will require inter- and intra-government coordination, which includes collaboration between federal government agencies as well as coordination with state and provincial government authorities. The coordination of national mobilisation will also demand close collaboration between government and industry, with commercial enterprise likely to deliver the equipment, bases, infrastructure and services required for the expansion of national defence capacity. Now finally, timing of mobilisation matters. Mobilised too early and much national wealth and human capital may be squandered or at least put to more unproductive ends. Mobilised too late and a national catastrophe may result, or might see total loss of sovereignty to an aggressor state. Now, in conclusion, the term mobilisation can be an emotional one, particularly for Western politicians. They must balance diplomatic relationships, domestic populations more focused on inflation control, and achieving sustainable budgets and services. And there are many elements of democratic societies that are resistant to young people being forced to serve their country. Unfortunately, Western nations must now confront a different reality than that of the immediate post-Cold War era. Russia, an existential threat to Ukraine and a massive threat to Europe, is driving different thinking in the capitals across this continent. This is also taking place in the Indo-Pacific, where countries like Japan have doubled their percentage of GDP on defence. Now, some politicians are waking up to the massive national security challenges posed by Russia and China. But many are yet to make the intellectual shift and take the political steps needed to build the kinds of deterrent capabilities to ensure that Ukraine is the end of authoritarian predatory behaviour and not the beginning. Possessing a concept for what national mobilisation might look like in the 21st century with its constituent elements of people, industry and ideas is just the beginning of this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. When polling companies like Pew, for instance, ask people in the European NATO countries, are you willing to defend your country? A few countries do relatively well. Finland, Greece, Poland, Sweden does okay. But in some countries, Germany not least, but also the Benelux, Spain, Portugal, the average yes answer quota is like 10%, 10-15%. If you're a leader in a country like that and you want to initiate a mobilization culture the way you describe it, where should one start?
I think too many people start with saying the current generation are too weak and these kind of things. I think that is the wrong answer, and it's actually not true. Current generation are magnificent. I think there are two things that drive people's propensity to want to defend their country. The first thing is the proximity of threat. If you are in Poland, you have a very different view of threat to your country than, say, New Zealand. So proximity of threat is one thing. The second really important thing is governments must provide purpose. Purpose is the most essential part of the political leadership that we have today. They must explain to people in an honest way what kind of threats are out there without trying to scare people too much, but in an honest way, and say we need to do these things and this is why we need to do it and this is how we need to do it. So proximity of threat and purpose are the two key elements, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.